Viva Chile, viva Chile, a Chile quiero, chileno yo soy.
And we welcome you back to Red Hot Chile. Dr. John Coben here. Well, I was having a conversation with a recent immigrant. I guess he got here in November. It's still pretty recent, right? So we're talking about 6 months. And he was a type of fellow that has a lot of opinions and forms a lot of opinions by talking to just whoever he meets on the street. And I guess that's okay to some extent. I'm all in favor of case studies, but scientifically you need to have more than just a couple observations. I mean, if you're going to do case studies, you better be careful about the circumstances and where you're talking. You're not talking to somebody who's drunk, for instance, and you don't just always go to low-class barrios or neighborhoods where you got people that are completely uneducated. Those are very dangerous people to survey on certain topics because you might get wrong answers. That may not. I hope that makes sense to you. And so this guy had been hanging around some pretty raunchy neighborhoods. This is one of those kind of guys that is an unusual fellow because he has tremendous complaints about Chile. He doesn't like the classism. Well, a lot of us don't like the classism. That's true. But one of his main beefs with Chile is it just doesn't have enough strip clubs. And I don't go to strip clubs, and so I don't know if we have what the quality is like, if you want to call it, compared to other places. But I said to this fellow, well, this is not really a place to come if you like a sort of a party, loose life. In fact, this is a great place to come if you're people like me that like traditional family values. And although Chile certainly has a lot of these things, I would suppose, especially in Santiago, that you'll find in other parts of the world, you're not going to have a lot of it compared to certain places. It's just not the way the culture is here. That's not to say people don't have adultery or other kinds of problems, drunkenness. This is a world full of human beings, and Chileans are human beings and have problems like anybody else. But it's just not like the red light district of Amsterdam, which I've been in. That doesn't happen here in Chile. There are topless beaches. You do see a lot of lingerie ads. I'll tell you, I'm so zero-lingual now. I can no longer speak. My Spanish stinks, and I can't speak English word beans anymore. It's really kind of a sad case. Maybe someday I'll learn a third or fourth language, and I'll be able to speak that well. But at any rate, he was complaining about this, and I said, well, you can always go to New Zealand or go somewhere else, and he's determined. He wants to stay here in the country and make a go of it. He's generally happy with it. He likes the fact that crime is low and some of the other benefits that come along with having a more traditional society. And I think low crime is related to having a traditional society. I think as soon as you let it all go loose, I think, when morality doesn't mean anything anymore, you're going to have people willing to kill, willing to brutalize people, willing to do child pornography, which basically doesn't exist in Chile as far as I know. People here just don't have that view of children and of old people it's so prevalent now in anywhere north of the Tropic of Cancer. So at any rate, he was making one of his educated opinions, well, maybe not so educated, and he just proclaimed to me that you just can't own a gun in Chile. And now this is obviously not a blog reader, because I've had people frequently who visit my entry on Should You Bring Your Gun to Chile and claim it's one of the best things they've ever seen on the subject, and thank me so much for writing it, and I appreciate it. I'll take the kudos for that. I did do a lot of work on the blog, and so I'm glad that was of some use to folks. The fact is that you can not only own a gun in Chile, you can bring one from outside of Chile, you can import it to Chile. There's a method to do that. You can also purchase guns here. There are plenty of gun shops in Santiago, and there's also gun shops in Valparaiso and other parts of Chile. You can own a gun, and it simply requires a registration of yourself as the person to be qualified as one who has a gun in his home, and to register the gun itself. And now somebody's going to say, well, that's not so free. In the United States, it's freer than that. Well, it is for the time being. I agree. I'm not going to say that in all counts Chile is freer than the United States. But I'll tell you what, it's not. Chile is way freer than New Zealand or Hong Kong or lots of parts of Europe when it comes to owning a gun. I wouldn't say Chile is, by any means last in the race, and I think at some point it'll even overtake the United States. for some of these things, like guns and ammunition. Now in Chile, there are prohibitions. You can't have the so-called assault rifles except for 22 caliber. Go figure. You can't reload ammunition. They don't like. I think you could probably get by if you put something like that in your container. I won't give you any legal advice on whether you should do that, but that might be something you could do. I don't think they may be checking up on you, but it's not something that you see sold in stores, except for, I believe, shotgun shells. I think you do see those. You can buy certain amounts rounds of ammunition that are really unlimited if you're at a range or you're doing target shooting or doing something with a hunting club. But I thought I would just show a couple of permits, like to the YouTube folks, since we have YouTube. This is a license that, or what I think it's called, yeah, my certificate or my license that basically says, yeah, I passed the test. They make me take a test. I make you take a psychological examination, and you get after you do that and you pass those two things, and you show that you have no criminal record, you can get approved for 5 years to carry, or excuse me, not carry, to have in your home a firearm. Carrying a firearm is very difficult in Chile. The concealed carry license is only for the few, the famous, basically. Last I heard, there were just less than a couple hundred people in the whole country that had the ability to do that, other than security guards, obviously, and cops. So, but it's not something you're going to be able to do very often here in Chile, unless you're a sportsman. You're carrying your gun in your car, and you have a sportsman's license, and it gives you ability to carry more guns. You'll be able to drive with them in your car and stuff. Other people just have normal licenses will not be able to do so. Here's an example of another license that is given. These are laminated here in the country, and with this kind of license, or this item, you can actually register the gun itself. So the local police here do that, and here we have a couple of these. Every person can have a couple of guns in Chile, so I just thought I'd bring some of those for people on YouTube. I'm probably not showing too much. I don't know. I'm not used to being on TV or I guess YouTube too often. But at any rate, it's possible to own a gun. So I'm sorry I had to inform the fellow who had his great opinion about guns that he was mistaken. Now you say, well, it's kind of a hassle. Yeah, it is. I mean, I'm not very happy that I have to go register my guns, and I'm not happy that I have to do some lame psychological test or eyesight test or any of these other things. And it's a cost. It's true. It's also more costly to have ammunition, to buy ammunition here, and guns in general, even to import them is expensive, unless you're bringing in expensive guns. Usually not even worth importing at all. But at least I can have one, and I can have more than one. And if you have several people in your household, everybody can have two without even getting to the sportsman's license level. And so be thankful for that. I mean, it's not that you do not have to go without a gun in Chile. You can have guns. Right at the moment, there's not a big push to eliminate gun ownership by private citizens. So that's good. And in fact, it's rather encouraged. Sometimes cops are very happy when an American or European shows up there and are registering their weapons, because they believe they're helping the police against the common thieves and criminals that will creep into homes and stuff here. So we have a lot of support from the police and elsewhere. So you can bring a gun to Chile. You can own a gun here. It is restricted to certainly more than many places in the United States, but it's certainly far freer in Chile than in other parts of the world. All right, now let's switch gears to our final point of the day, because I'm actually getting on this a little bit later than I was hoping to in the show. I want to talk to you about where you can live in Chile. And I'm hoping that you're able to get your map out. And there's a map in the EscapeAmericaNow.info blog. Back in August 2008, there was a map scan, and you can use that at the very least if you don't have an updated map yourself. But where can you live? What should you expect when you come to Chile? I don't want people to become discouraged when they're moving to Chile, because they realize it's not all that cheap to live compared to where they were. And I speak to specifically to people not who are very wealthy, which is the majority of people I meet that come down here, my consulting clients, for instance, but rather those people that are used to living in backwoods America or out in the countryside of America, where you can still get a home for $100,000. You live, in a one-horse town. It might have 5 stoplights and just got the McDonald's last year, or something like that. and you move down here and you're used to living pretty cheap. And there are still places in America you can live that way. I understand that. When you do the transition from there to Santiago, it's going to be very expensive. You're not going to be used to the price difference in a lot of things. Now, maybe the rent won't be as expensive, and certainly the medical insurance will not be. Those would be big savings areas. But in a lot of other things, it will be much more expensive for you. And it's really not a fair comparison, is it? I mean, going from a podunk town, wherever you might be in Europe or the United States, and moving to a major city like London or to Houston, which I guess is most similar to Santiago, which is just under 7 million people, you're not really making a fair comparison. If you move to Viña del Mar in the Valparaiso area, you have less than 1 million people, and yeah, that's a little more comparable, but still, it's far away. It's not the same thing going from a town of 20,000 people or 50,000 people to a town of 1 million people. So you're going to have to expect some differences. If you want to be fair, take that little 20,000 person town and compare it to a 20,000 person town in Chile, and I think that's a fair comparison. The problem with those 20,000 person towns is they're not always great places to live. You're not necessarily going to be liking it because the standard of living may not be as first world as your wife really wants or as you are willing to tolerate. And I'm picking on wives here just again because 90+% of the time it's the wife that tends to be a little recalcitrant or a little reluctant to come to Chile. That's not always the case, but in the great majority of cases it is indeed. So have your map out ready to go. When we come back from the break, I want to go case by case, categories 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, depending on your net worth, what kind of budget you might have, how much you can survive on here, even with you call yourself retired and you really just save using your savings until you can get a job. Where should you be looking to live so you can be comfortable? That's the idea. You are listening to Red Hot Chili on the Overseas Radio Network. This is Dr. John Coven. We'll be back right after this break.